The fog hung low over the Devonshire countryside, like a curtain drawn across a stage, hiding secrets behind folds of silver grey. The village of Elveston was one of those quaint little hamlets that existed more in legend than reality. Cottages, rose gardens, blooming defiantly against the chill, and a church bell that rang just a shade too mournfully for comfort. There was little to disturb the harmony of Elveston until the early hours of a cold October morning, when a scream shattered the silence of Heatherdown Hall. Heatherdown Hall was a sprawling, time-worn manor perched at the edge of the moors, surrounded by yew hedges and a line of ancient oaks said to be older than the estate itself. Its master, Colonel Ambrose Lutterworth, was a man of routine, reputation, and resolute punctuality. When he failed to arrive for breakfast that morning, his housekeeper, Mrs. Drusilla Bright, went up to fetch him, only to find the heavy door of the colonel's study locked from the inside. It took the combined efforts of the butler and the gardener to break it open, and there he lay. Colonel Lutterworth, proud veteran of 2 wars, avid hunter, and pillar of the local society, was slumped in his chair, mouth agape and eyes wide. In a frozen expression of disbelief, a glass of brandy sat untouched on the desk beside him. There were no visible wounds, no sign of a struggle, just the faintest trace of something unease, perhaps lingering in the room like a shadow, not yet banished by dawn. The police were called at once, but so too was another name, one whispered from neighbor to neighbor with growing urgency, a name known throughout the country for its association with deduction, refinement, and the unparalleled neatness of its owner's moustache. Monsieur Hercule Poirot. Poirot arrived in Elveston just after noon, wearing a grey overcoat impeccably tailored, a black bowler hat, and a silk scarf of such precise folding that it might have been drawn with a ruler. His companion, Captain Hastings, had not accompanied him away, it seemed, on a fishing trip in Scotland. Poirot was not perturbed. He rarely was. Inspector Nigel Harrow of the local constabulary met him at the door of Heatherdown Hall, his ruddy cheeks flushed with either the cold or his own frustration. "Damn odd business," Harrow muttered. "No marks on the body. No sign of anyone entering or leaving. Door was locked from the inside. Windows bolted. Fire still warm in the grate. Looks like a heart attack, except Dr. Malvin says otherwise. Says it looks... well, unnatural." Unnatural, Poirot repeated thoughtfully. Such a useful word. So flexible. Like a walking stick made of India rubber. He was ushered into the late colonel's study. The room was exactly as the first responders had found it. A heavy oak desk, the fireplace glowing softly, bookshelves crammed with military histories and hunting trophies, and the body now respectfully removed by the coroner had left only an impression in the leather chair and a lingering tension in the air. Poirot moved through the room like a dancer on a polished stage, his eyes roving, catching details, unnoticed by others. He paused near the brandy decanter, sniffed the air. No smell of almonds. Curious. He knelt near the fireplace, brushing aside a scattering of fine white ash. His fingers stopped. There, nearly hidden among the grey, was something peculiar. A long, silvery hair. Not human, he thought at once. Perhaps fox. Inspector Poirot said softly, holding up the delicate strand between tweezers he'd conjured from his coat pocket. "What animal frequents this area, would you say?" "A few badgers. Rabbits. Oh, and there's that blasted old fox the locals call the silver ghost. Been sighted for years. That one sleek silver coat, eyes like lanterns in the dark. Nobody's ever caught it." Poirot smiled. "A ghost, you say? How deliciously theatrical." He turned now to the desk, papers in a small stack, a letter opener shaped like a saber, and a blotter showing faint signs of recent use. Poirot leaned close. "Has anyone examined the last page Colonel Lutterworth wrote upon?" "I imagine we collected the letter," Harrow said. Routine. Poirot frowned. "May I see it?" Moments later, Harrow returned with a single sheet, folded neatly. It was addressed to Mr. Lionel Partridge, solicitor. "Dear Partridge," it began, "there are matters which must be put in order, and I fear time grows short. Should anything happen to me, and I do not say this lightly, I beg you to ensure the sealed documents I deposited in your care are opened and acted upon. They concern not only my affairs, but those of the family, and one in particular who must never know the truth... The letter broke off, mid-sentence, the final word underlined. Truth. Poirot's eyes gleamed. So mon colonel feared for his safety, and perhaps, he feared someone he loved. He turned to Harrow, who inherits the estate. The inspector scratched his chin. "No wife, no children. Only a niece, Miss Imogen Lutterworth. Young, quiet, lives here with him. She's the only direct relative, and others in the house. The butler, Fletcher, housekeeper, Mrs. Bright, gardener, old Mr. Dean, and a guest, staying these past few weeks, one Mr. Marcus Cray, a writer of some sort, also Miss Delia Vaughan, an old friend of the Colonel's from India. She arrived 2 nights ago. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A house of 5, a locked room, a dead man, a ghostly fox, and now a missing truth. He stood. Let us meet them, one by one. The drawing room was subdued, its high windows casting pale light over polished floors and worn furniture. Poirot sat near the fire as each person was brought to him. Imogen Lutterworth was in her early 20s, willowy and soft-spoken, dressed in muted greys with a silver brooch in the shape of a rose. He was the only father I ever knew, she said simply. I can't understand it, Poirot noted, her pale hands trembling slightly. Not fear, he thought, something subtler, guilt, or anticipation. Marcus Cray arrived next, tall, bearded, vaguely dramatic. This is ghastly, he said. Ambrose was a friend, a complicated man, always had secrets. I used to joke that he'd buried a treasure somewhere on the grounds. And why are you staying here? Poirot asked, peace and quiet. Writing a new novel. Not that I've made much progress. Poirot asked him if he'd seen or heard anything the night before. Just the wind, Cray replied, and something strange. I thought I saw a shape outside my window, pale like an animal. Said Poirot, the ghost of the silver fox. Next came Miss Delia Vaughan, elegant, in her 50s, with a voice like cracked velvet. I knew Ambrose in Delhi, she said. He was always strong-willed, proud. He wrote to me often, invited me to visit this year after many seasons apart. Poirot smiled warmly. And did he speak to you of secrets? Her eyes glittered. Colonel Lutterworth had secrets the way others have tea, regularly, and strong. The remaining 2 servants offered little. Fletcher, the butler, proper and taciturn, claimed to have retired early. Mrs. Bright had been in the kitchen, preparing jam. Poirot asked to see their shoes. He knelt to examine the soles. On Mrs. Bright's heel the faintest trace of white ash. Fireplace ash. Poirot said nothing. Not yet. Later, back in the study, he held again the single strand of silvery hair. Human, he murmured. Not animal either. Synthetic. A wig, perhaps. He studied the fireplace. Or ... the corner of a costume. A disguise. He turned once more to the final sentence of the Colonel's letter. One who must never know the truth. The truth, Poirot thought, was circling him like a fox in the night. Silent, patient, and perhaps ... already watching. The morning after Colonel Lutterworth's death dawned with a brittle cold. A fine layer of frost coated the iron gateposts and glimmered like glass on the ivy-clad walls of Heatherdown Hall. The air was still, as though the entire countryside was holding its breath. Inside the drawing-room, Inspector Harrow was nursing a strong cup of tea while Hercule Poirot stood at the mantelpiece, warming his neatly gloved hands. Though the fire crackled merrily, there was no warmth between the 2 men. Harrow was not an incompetent man, but he had learned, as many others had, that sharing an investigation with Poirot often meant watching his own deductions be swept aside like yesterday's ashes. The autopsy confirms what we suspected, Harrow said at last, setting down his teacup. No visible injury. But the coroner has found a trace of aconitine in the blood. Monkshood, a highly toxic plant. It appears our colonel was poisoned. Poirot arched a brow. Monkshood. Yes, aconite. Blue flowers, quite striking. And fatal in the smallest of doses. It acts on the nervous system. Nessie, causes cardiac arrest. Harrow nodded. Which explains the lack of struggle. A few drops slipped into his brandy, most likely, but the brandy was untouched. Poirot said thoughtfully. So either the poison was administered elsewhere, or he was meant to believe the brandy was poisoned. None, mon ami. I suspect this murder was meant to look natural. The locked room, the unmarked body, the final letter. He turned to Harrow. Let us begin again. From the beginning. A method most reliable. Harrow sighed. Very well. We know the Colonel was last seen alive at around 9:15 p.m. after dinner. Fletcher brought him his evening brandy and left him in the study. The room was locked when the staff tried to enter the next morning. No one admits to hearing anything during the night. Poirot nodded, and all the windows were secured. Yet someone entered or was already there. And what of the mysterious documents mentioned in the letter? They've been located, Harrow said. Delivered by his solicitor, Mr. Partridge, this morning. Mostly financial papers. But one envelope was marked, to be opened in the event of my unnatural death. Poirot's eyes sparkled, and Harrow opened the folder and drew out a single page. It's a statement handwritten. Colonel Lutterworth claims he's been the victim of blackmail. For the past 6 months, someone has been threatening to expose a secret from his past. No name, just the phrase, the Silver Fox knows. The Silver Fox again, Poirot murmured. A nickname, or a symbol. And what was the secret, does he say? Harrow shook his head. No, just this. If I am found dead, look to the fox. It watches from within the walls. Poirot smiled, cryptic. But such phrases are often more literal than they seem. Let us speak again with those who shared his final days. They found Marcus Cray seated at the library window, scribbling into a notepad. He looked up as they entered. Any progress? He asked, slightly too cheerfully. That depends on your definition, Poirot replied. May I ask again, Mr. Cray, what precisely brought you to Heatherdown Hall? Cray adjusted his spectacles. Inspiration, country air. One knew the colonel from my travels in Burma. He extended an invitation. I've been here a month, though, not writing nearly as much as I should. And did you know about the blackmail? Harrow asked bluntly. Cray blinked. Blackmail? No, that's new to me, but Ambrose was a proud man. I'm not surprised he had enemies. Poirot watched him closely. And the phrase, the Silver Fox knows, does that mean anything to you? Cray paused. Only the local legend. There's an old tale about a ghostly fox that haunts these lands. Children whisper it around bonfires. The Silver Fox appears before something dreadful happens. It's nonsense, of course. Poirot nodded, thanked him, and left. He and Harrow proceeded next to the morning room, where Miss Imogen Lutterworth sat surrounded by lace and embroidery hoops. Miss Lutterworth, Poirot said gently, your uncle left a note suggesting he feared for his life. He also mentioned a person who must never know the truth. Do you suppose he meant you? Her hands trembled as she set aside her needlework. I don't know, she whispered. Uncle Ambrose was ... private. He didn't confide in me. I wish he had. Maybe I could have helped. Poirot said, tell me about your life here. Did anyone come and go unexpectedly in the past weeks? No, nothing out of the ordinary. Mrs. Bright runs a strict household, yet she made jam the night of the murder. Poirot mused. Did you try it? She shook her head. I disliked jam. Did you ever hear him argue with any of the other guests? Mr. Cray, Miss Vaughan. No arguments, but ... yes. She hesitated. Uncle received a strange parcel last week. No return address. He locked it away in his desk. Poirot leaned forward. And what was inside? I don't know. But after he opened it, he seemed ... afraid. He hardly ate. He began locking his study even when he was in it. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Merci, mademoiselle. That is most helpful. The final conversation of the day was with Miss Delia Vaughan. She stood in the conservatory, watching the leaves fall from the great horse-chestnut tree beyond the glass. Your visit, madame, it was sudden, was it not? Poirot asked. She turned. Ambrose and I had lost touch. I received a letter 2 weeks ago, inviting me to come. Said there were matters to settle, personal ones. Did he mention fear? Blackmail? Her lips tightened. No, but he was jumpy. He barely slept. He kept the lights on at night. The man who used to laugh at superstition. Poirot considered her. Do you know what the Silver Fox is? A story, and a symbol. In India we had similar tales. The fox, the trickster, the hidden thing. He believed in such omens. And you? Poirot asked. I believe in the truth. And I think Ambrose was trying to tell someone, perhaps you, a final message. Poirot nodded gravely. Indeed, madame, and I shall listen. That evening Poirot walked alone through the gardens, his hands behind his back. Above him, the moon was thin and sharp like a blade. He stopped by the eastern wing of the house and looked up. There, half covered in ivy, was a carving on the stone, a fox, long and stylized tail curled like a question mark. Poirot entered the house and asked Fletcher, the butler, for the keys to the study. Once alone in the dim room, Poirot examined the desk again. He opened each drawer, running his fingers along the wood. In the third drawer, tucked behind a panel, he found it, the parcel Imogen had mentioned. Wrapped in brown paper and twine, it contained a single item, a photograph. It was old, grainy. It showed 5 men in military uniform, standing beside a jeep. The man in the center was unmistakable, Colonel Lutterworth. Next to him, wearing a Silver Fox insignia on his lapel, was a face Poirot did not recognize. On the back of the photograph was a name, scrawled in ink, James Wickham. Poirot blinked. Wickham. He turned to the fireplace and retrieved the silvery strand once again. He held it beside the photograph, staring hard. A memory stirred. Back in London, Poirot had once heard of a man, a former intelligence officer, known for disguises. His code name during covert operations had been the Silver Fox. Poirot's eyes widened. So, not a legend, a man. He stood. He now knew what Colonel Lutterworth had feared, and who might be next. But who was the Silver Fox now? And was he here, still hiding in plain sight? The next morning arrived with a strange hush over Heatherdown Hall. It was not the calm of peace, but that of tension pulled taut, a silence that waits to be broken. Poirot, ever immaculate, appeared for breakfast precisely at 8 a.m. The household gathered around the large oak table in the dining room. Imogen sat staring into her tea. Mr. Cray read the Times with the posture of forced ease. Delia Vaughan buttered a slice of toast with clinical precision, her rings flashing in the lamplight. Mrs. Bright moved silently between chairs with a decanter of orange juice. Fletcher, stoic as ever, stood in the corner. The air crackled with unspoken words. Poirot did not eat, he observed. At 8:37, Colonel Lutterworth's dog, an aging Irish terrier named Binks, let out a howl from the back of the house. Poirot excused himself and followed the sound to the boot room, where Binks was pawing at a locked cupboard, whining pitifully. Poirot knelt. The dog sniffed him, then returned to scratching the cupboard door. Curious. Poirot summoned Harrow. "I want this opened, if you please." Harrow arrived with a set of master keys, and after a moment the cupboard gave way with a reluctant creak. Inside, stacked in dusty disorder, were a few gardening boots, a broken shooting stick, and, oddly, a box of correspondence. Poirot reached for it. The dog barked twice. Inside the box were letters, dozens of them. Most were addressed to Colonel Lutterworth, but they were signed J.W. James Wickham. Back in the study, Poirot laid the letters out on the desk. One by one, they revealed a strange history. James Wickham had served with Lutterworth in Burma, where they had been involved in covert intelligence work. But these were not professional correspondences. They were emotional, confiding. Some hinted at regret. Others were more threatening. "You know what we did? It was never supposed to follow us here. And yet here we are. I will not be silent forever. If you won't tell her the truth, I will. She deserves to know who her father was, what he became. The Silver Fox remembers everything." Poirot leaned back. So that was the secret. A man who had died or been made to disappear during the war. A betrayal. A woman, a child. Someone who was never told the truth of their origins. Someone in this house. Poirot's mind turned sharply to Imogen, her eyes pale green like Wickham's in the photograph. Her age barely 24. If Wickham died 25 years ago, and Lutterworth had he raised her as his own to conceal her father's disgrace, that would explain the line. One who must never know the truth. But someone had threatened to tell her. Someone in this house. Poirot called for Inspector Harrow and presented his findings. Harrow frowned. "This Wickham fellow, he's dead, you say?" "Presumed dead," Poirot corrected. "But clearly he lived long enough to send these letters. The last one is dated 4 weeks ago. Where from?" Poirot smiled grimly. "That's just it. No postmark, no address. They were hand-delivered." Harrow swore. "So someone here, one of the staff, or one of the guests," Poirot said quietly. "Let us test the fabric of these alibis." First came Mr. Cray. "I was in my room all evening," he said, sounding bored. "Writing, well, attempting to." Poirot eyed him. "You claim you saw a ghostly figure outside your window that night?" Cray nodded. "Yes, around midnight, just for a second." "Describe it." "Slender, pale, could have been anything. A fox, a woman in a nightdress. I didn't have my glasses on." Poirot tilted his head. "You are nearsighted, very. Yet you read without them at breakfast." Cray paused. "Only the headlines." Poirot said nothing. Next came Delia Vaughan. "I retired early," she said firmly. "At 9:30 I had a slight headache." Poirot asked, "And you did not leave your room?" "I did not." "Can anyone confirm?" "No, but must I have an alibi for simply going to bed?" Poirot offered a mild smile. "Not at all. But you knew Wickham, did you not?" Her eyes flickered. "What makes you say that?" "You were in Delhi in 1929, so was he, so was Lutterworth." Her expression cooled. "I knew of him, we were never close." Poirot studied her for a long moment. "Then I must ask, do you know who Imogen's real father is?" Delia paled. "I think you do." Imogen came next. She was hesitant, wringing her hands in her lap. Poirot was kind. "Do you know the name James Wickham, mademoiselle?" She blinked. "No. You are sure?" She hesitated. "It was written in one of Uncle's old diaries, I thought. It was a friend. And your mother? She died when I was very small. I barely remember her. Do you know who your father was?" She stared at him. "Uncle Ambrose. That's what I've always believed." Poirot said softly, "What if I told you he may have raised you to protect you from something, or someone?" Imogen's voice trembled. Like what? Poirot hesitated, then shook his head. Not yet. Mrs. Bright came reluctantly, still wiping her hands on a kitchen cloth. I've been with the family for 30 years. Mr. Poirot, she said. I loved the Colonel like a brother, but he had shadows. Shadows? Poirot prompted. There were nights I found him, weeping in the study. Once he was burning letters in the hearth. I thought he was mad, but I think now, ... they haunted him. Poirot nodded. Did you ever hear the name Wickham? She flinched. A soldier, the Colonel used to shout it in his sleep. Poirot gave her a long look. Madame, on the night of the murder, you said you were in the kitchen making jam. Yes. And yet your shoes had ash on them. She looked startled. I might have stoked the scullery fire. It gets cold. Poirot said nothing, just made a small note in his pocketbook. Then came Fletcher. I saw nothing, sir, he said. Only delivered the brandy at 9:15. The Colonel was alive then, and you went straight to bed. I read for a while, then retired. What book? Chesterton, The Man Who Was Thursday, Poirot murmured. How fitting. Fletcher blinked. Sir. Poirot smiled. A book about a man pretending to be what he is not. Perhaps we are all playing roles, Nan. That evening Poirot walked alone in the gallery above the library. Below him, the household moved quietly through the house like chess pieces. He paused by a portrait of Colonel Lutterworth, painted in his youth. Strong jaw, sharp eyes, medals. On his chest, beside him, almost hidden, was another portrait. Dusty, smaller. Poirot lit a match and held it close. A man with silver hair, a fox pinned to his lapel. James Wickham. Poirot stared. Not a ghost, he whispered. A man in the walls. Suddenly he understood. He rushed downstairs, past the drawing room, into the east corridor. He opened the panel at the back of the linen closet. Inside was a narrow passageway, ancient and dusty. He followed it with care. At the end, he found a small door, locked. He knocked once. There was a pause, then it opened, and there stood a man, silver, lean, eyes sharp as knives. Bonsoir, Poirot said. You must be Wickham. The man smiled. Took you long enough, Monsieur Poirot. James Wickham did not look like a ghost, nor did he seem particularly sorry to have faked his death. Dressed in a faded wool coat, his silver hair tied back loosely, and a face lined not only by time but secrets, he stood in the narrow space of the hidden room like a man long used to its shadows. The small chamber behind the east corridor was once a priest-hole, a relic from Tudor times, its stone walls thick, its ventilation subtle. A narrow cot, a trunk, and several oil lamps suggested he had lived here not for a night or two, but for weeks, possibly months. Poirot stepped carefully inside. Do not worry, Wickham said dryly. I don't intend to attack you with a poker or vanish in a puff of smoke. Poirot raised an eyebrow. On the contrary, monsieur, I should rather enjoy a ghost vanishing. It would save considerable paperwork. Wickham chuckled, a dry, crackling sound. So, you found me. I wondered if you would. Poirot gestured to the cot. May I sit? Be my guest. He did so, brushing dust from the edge. You are presumed dead. You write threatening letters, you haunt the walls of Heatherdown Hall. Forgive me, monsieur, but such theatrics border on melodrama. I had my reasons. Yes. And I shall hear them. But you understand, of course, that the Colonel is dead. Wickham's expression changed. The color drained slightly from his face. Dead. Poirot nodded. Poisoned. 3 nights ago, monkshood. The silence in the room deepened. Wickham sat slowly, heavily, onto the trunk. His hands trembled. I didn't kill him, he said softly. I did not accuse you. I swear it. Poirot studied him. Then you must tell me everything. From the beginning, Wickham's tale was not short, nor was it without pain. He and Colonel Lutterworth had served together in Burma during the war. Their unit had been involved in operations to delicate, for most records, intelligence gathering, prisoner negotiations, assassinations. One of their missions went horribly wrong. A civilian informant was killed. Wickham believed it to be a tragic accident, but Lutterworth, fearing political fallout, claimed Wickham had acted recklessly. A court-martial followed. Wickham was offered a choice: disappear and never return, or face trial and disgrace. They told me it was for the good of the regiment, Wickham said bitterly, that I would be taken care of. So he vanished. He took on identities, moved through India, then the Balkans. Eventually he returned to England under a new name. In the decades since, he had watched and waited. I never meant to write those letters, he said. But I couldn't keep silent. Not after I learned the truth about Imogen. Poirot's expression sharpened. Go on. Her mother, Eleanor, she and I were involved. Before the war, we wrote, even while I was in Burma. But after the scandal, Ambrose stepped in. claimed the child was his niece. Eleanor never contradicted him. Poirot nodded slowly. So you believe Imogen is your daughter? I know she is. I saw her once, in London. The resemblance to Eleanor is uncanny. Poirot interlocked his fingers. And you intended to tell her? I didn't know. I wasn't sure. I began to write. Then Ambrose invited me here. Wait, he invited you? Wickham nodded. Anonymously. Said there were documents I should see. Proof of something. But the past had returned. Poirot was silent for a long time. And so, he said at last, you entered this house. Secretly, when 2 weeks ago, through the cellar door. The staff doesn't lock it. They think no one could get past the hedges. I've been hiding here since. Poirot rose and began pacing. You did not kill him, he said. I believe that. But someone else knew about your presence. Someone feared what your return would reveal. Wickham nodded grimly. Which means they may be coming for me next. Poirot's expression darkened. Yes, that is what I fear as well. That night, Poirot said nothing to Harrow, not yet. The discovery of Wickham complicated the picture, and the great detective preferred his puzzles fully visible before sharing the pieces. Instead, he sat at the colonel's desk, reviewing once more the mysterious letter left unfinished. The one who must never know the truth. Who was that? Imogen, or someone else? Poirot opened the sealed envelope marked for Imogen, only if I am gone. It was a single page. The handwriting was shaky. My dear child, you have been my joy, my guilt, and my redemption. I must tell you that I was not your father by blood. Your mother, Eleanor, loved another, a man I believed had betrayed us both. But I have come to realize I was wrong. He was a better man than I allowed myself to see. Forgive me. Ambrose. Poirot read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it back. So Ambrose had repented. He had called Wickham here to make peace, but someone had intervened. Someone who knew that if the truth emerged, their standing, perhaps their inheritance, would be at risk. And that meant only one thing. The murderer had known everything. The next morning, Poirot requested a walk with Imogen. They strolled through the frost-covered gardens, past the copper beech, and the derelict fountain. Mademoiselle, he said gently, I must ask you something difficult. She looked up. Yes. Do you recall ever meeting a man with silver hair, slender build, sharp eyes? She frowned. That sounds like someone I passed once. In the lane last week. He didn't speak, but he looked ... kind. Poirot nodded. And do you feel ... watched? She smiled faintly. Always. But not in a bad way, like someone's making sure I'm safe. Poirot stopped walking. He said quietly, would you like to meet your real father? Imogen froze. What? Poirot nodded. He is here, in hiding. Colonel Lutterworth invited him to make peace. Her lips parted. But ... why? Because the truth matters, mademoiselle, even when it is painful. She said nothing, but her eyes brimmed with tears. That evening Poirot brought her to the hidden chamber. Father and daughter stood face to face. The moment was not filled with grand words or gasping revelations. Wickham simply held out a hand. Imogen took it. Poirot left them there, and returned to the study. Now the final piece awaited. At 10 o'clock Poirot summoned the household into the drawing-room. Inspector Harrow arrived shortly thereafter. I have asked you here, Poirot began, because we stand upon the brink of truth. One man is dead, another was buried by lies. A young woman has been kept from her identity, but no more. He turned to the fireplace. Colonel Lutterworth was poisoned, not randomly, not accidentally, but with the precision of someone who feared exposure. And the clue, Mies Amos, is this. He held up the last brandy glass. It was not the drink that killed him, it was the jam. Gasps rang out. Poirot nodded. Yes, the colonel had a ritual, one toast with jam after his evening walk. The poison was in the jam pot served only to him, placed there with care. And who made that jam? He turned sharply. Mrs. Bright. The housekeeper looked stunned. I didn't mean to harm him. I swear it. You did not intend to kill him, Poirot echoed. Curious, since aconitine is not something one sprinkles lightly. Mrs. Bright collapsed into a chair. I was protecting her. Poirot asked Imogen. She cried. If he told her the truth, if that man was her real father, it would ruin her. Everything he built for her, gone. Poirot's voice was cold. You poisoned a man for a secret that was not yours to guard. I raised her like a daughter. I couldn't let a traitor claim her. She had the right to know, Poirot said firmly. Silence. Then Delia Vaughan spoke. Softly, she's not the only one who knew. I suspected years ago. I tried to warn Ambrose. He wouldn't listen. Poirot nodded. And now justice will be served. That night, Mrs. Bright was taken away in silence. Wickham remained hidden. no longer, and Imogen stood beneath the great yew tree, holding the letter her uncle had written. Her past, though painful, was now hers to own. Poirot, standing beside her, simply said, "The ghost has gone, mademoiselle. There is only the truth now." She looked at him and smiled.